Genevieve.
With a show of hands, how many of you have felt fear before? So as you can see, fear is a very common emotion. We've all experienced it almost every day, but we really don't know a lot about how we can overcome it. Setting that thought aside for now, how many of you have also been in the ocean? So swimming, going on a boat, surfing, being in the ocean is also a fairly common experience. When I was little, my parents would often take my siblings and I to the beach over the summer, and like most people, my favorite activity would be to swim in the ocean. I would ride with the waves, which made me feel like I could fly, and watching the sun glitter on the surface of the water was so majestic. When I was younger, I only had positive memories associated with the ocean, so I was very fond of it. But now that I'm older, and I know a bit more about it, I also know that it's probably the most terrifying entity on the planet. I'm going to get a bit personal for a second and talk about some nightmares that I've had where I'm surrounded by pitch black water and I can't swim for whatever reason, and then I can't breathe. These nightmares are especially terrifying because there's a sense of a lack of control since we're not built for water. So that makes it even scarier. When we think back to how many of you raised your hands to say that you felt fear before, we also think of a few common fears that people have. And feel free to look away from the following images. They're not super gruesome or gory, but if it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to look at this. There is nyctophobia, which is a fear of the darkness. And there's glossophobia, which is a fear of public speaking. The root phobia implies that these fears are unreasonable or irrational, like there's no explanation behind it. After all, the darkness can't come out and attack you or hurt you, so why do we avoid it so much? And I'm speaking publicly right now, but I'm not in any immediate danger, yet glossophobia affects nearly 75% of the population. So there's almost no reason behind a phobia. What I find interesting, however, is thalassophobia, which is basically a fear of deep bodies of water, such as the ocean. As I said before, thalassophobia implies that it doesn't make sense if you're afraid of the ocean. On the contrary, a lot of evidence we have suggests that every single person in this room should be absolutely terrified of the ocean. Here's why. In this picture, it's clearly a jellyfish. It looks pretty harmless, almost cute. But according to American Oceans, it's actually quite possibly the most dangerous animal on the planet because it's the most venomous animal on the planet. This is the box jellyfish family, and just one dart of its venom can kill 60 adult human beings. I also don't know how many of you have ever experienced a jellyfish sting before, but it's never fun. That's what the sting of a box jellyfish looks like. Very painful, and of course, very deadly. Then there is the lion's mane jellyfish, which is the biggest jellyfish in the ocean. It can grow up to 120 feet in length, which is about 4 times bigger than the average boat you take into the water. So if you're ever in the middle of the ocean on a boat, just think about what can be just a few feet underneath you. Jellyfish also tend to travel in big groups called blooms, and jellyfish blooms can have a handful of jellyfish, hundreds, or even thousands. And these blooms have actually become quite the issue and made it more difficult to get necessary resources that we use from the ocean. So jellyfish in general are a bit of an issue. Then there is the fact that the ocean is filled with thousands of different kinds of bacteria, several of which have been known to cause infections in certain people. For example, according to Best Life, a woman developed necrotizing fasciitis after dipping her feet into the water off of Myrtle Beach. That's what the infection looks like. It spreads very, very rapidly throughout the body, and of course, more often than not, leads to death. Now, you may think that, that's just one instance, it probably doesn't happen very often. But actually, 250 million clinical cases of human disease every year are because of the ocean. So instances such as this imply that there's a risk of contamination or infection every time you step into the water, especially with today's current pollution levels. Besides bacteria, the ocean also has a lot of parasites. This is sea lice, and what it does is it basically makes a habitat out of the mouth of its hosts, usually a fish. It slowly eats away at its host's tongue until it becomes the tongue itself, and throughout its lifespan, uses its host's blood supply as a source of its own energy. I do not want to think about that when I'm going swimming in the ocean. Next is that the ocean can literally crush us all to death. Teresa DeMauro, who is an author at factinate.com, says that every 10 meters you descend into the ocean, there's an increase of pressure by about 14.5 psi. So being crushed by the entire weight of the ocean is equivalent to being crushed by 50 jumbo jets. Granted, this pressure hasn't limited us entirely because the farthest that a human scuba diver has ever been is 332.35 meters, or 1,090 feet. That may seem like a great distance, but that's barely a fifth of a mile. And any farther than that, without sufficient technology, our lungs would compress from this size to that size, our eardrums would rupture, and then we would die. So if listening to all this fun information made you feel like you never want to step into the ocean ever again, I don't blame you. The ocean is a scary place. It's filled with a lot of dangerous things. But it's also filled with a lot of beautiful things. And either way, how can we really know what's out there unless we don't go to discover it for ourselves? These statistics say that around 71% of the Earth's surface is covered in water. But we've only mapped about 5% of that. So we can't know what's out there that can help us or that can hurt us if we don't go and discover it for ourselves. And we actually have plenty of evidence that is sufficient motivation to continue oceanic research because it can help us. So I know I made a bit of a big deal earlier about how jellyfish cause all of these problems, but I would say this one is an exception. This is the immortal jellyfish, and like its name suggests, it has the remarkable ability to regress back into a polyp, which is the juvenile stage of development for a jellyfish. It's like if a 70 or 80-year-old human being turned back into a 15 or 16-year-old. So it extends its life and prevents death by age or injury. This is thanks to a rare process called transdifferentiation, which in simple terms is when a cell can turn into an entirely new cell with new functions and new abilities. The American Museum of Natural History says that scientists are very intrigued by this process because of its potential applications in modern medicine. It can help stem cell research because it's replacing dead or diseased cells with newly functional cells. That may sound pretty boring, but this is the foundation for a cure for every genetic disease known to man. That's important in the scientific community, the mathematical community, any community on this planet. It can help them all. Reason number 2 is that the ocean is the biggest ally we have against climate change. A United Nations article says that it generates around 50% of the oxygen we need to breathe, and it absorbs around 25% of the world's carbon dioxide. Why is that so important? CO2 is a greenhouse gas that depletes the ozone layer in our atmosphere, which is responsible for absorbing ultraviolet radiation and excess heat from the sun. So basically, without the ocean's help, it's likely that our ozone layer would dissolve completely, very quickly, thus rendering us very helpless to the sun's radiation and heat, causing even more skin cancers and skin diseases. Sort of tying into that is that the ocean basically controls the weather. The United States Geological Survey says that the ocean circulates vital heat and moisture around the globe with its hot and cold ocean currents, thus regulating the Earth's climate and temperature. So without the ocean's help there, we'd most likely become overwhelmed with natural disasters, like hurricanes and tsunamis, and we all know how fun those are. And our planet would most likely overheat to the point that it would become inhabitable to human life. So, now we know that the ocean is as important to life on land as it is for life in water. Yay! That doesn't make it any less scary though. But when have humans ever let fear stop them before? During the American Revolution, rebels had to have been terrified when they were fighting against the British monarchy because they didn't know if they were going to fail or succeed. But they overcame that fear, and we're all better off for that now. Similarly, during the Haitian Revolution, these are just normal people trying to get their normal lives back. They had to have been scared out of their minds if they were fighting against colonizers, British armies, French armies, and they didn't know whether or not they were going to survive the next day. But they were more determined than they were afraid. And thanks to them, they're living much better lives now. We need to have the same thought process here. Otherwise, we'll live in constant uncertainty and fear as we're surrounded by miles and miles and miles of ocean, which is increasing by 0.13 inches every year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up over time. I implore you all to think about if you're letting fear hold you back from doing something you know you want to do. And I leave you with a quote by Franklin D. Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Never let fear hold you back. Thank you.